Buddha once asked his monks how long a person should expect to live. One answered a day and a night. Another said the time it takes to eat a single meal. The Buddha turned away from every answer until one monk spoke of a single breath, the one you are taking right now. That monk, the Buddha said, was the only one in the room truly awake. Life is shorter than you think. This video holds 5 stories that have been waking people up for thousands of years, each one told to a real person standing at the edge of a wasted life. A man forced to carry a bowl of oil through a cheering crowd, knowing that one spilled drop means a sword falls on his neck. A donkey who wore a lion's skin so long he forgot what he was. A teacher who measured your years against a dewdrop waiting for sunrise. A devoted man who spent decades perfecting a practice that led nowhere and wept when he found out. Every one of them worked, and the first begins with a death sentence hanging over a man in a crowd. Settle in wherever you are. Wherever in the world this evening finds you, you are welcome. The cry went through the town at mid-morning, passed from doorway to doorway like a spark moving along a line of dry grass. The loveliest girl in the land had come. She would dance in the open square, and she would sing, and anyone who wished could come and see her. Shops began closing before the crier had finished his round. Farmers left their fields with the morning's work half done. By the time the sun stood high, the roads into town were full of people walking quickly, all of them in the same direction, all of them talking about the same thing. The square filled the way. A bowl fills under a spring, steadily, from the bottom up. Children were lifted onto shoulders. Vendors moved through the crush, selling sweets and cut fruit, shouting their prices over the noise. Old men, who claimed to care nothing for dancing, found reasons to stand where they could see. There was music now, drums and strings, tuning themselves toward the moment, and the sound alone pulled hundreds more in from the edges of town. When she finally stepped out and began to dance, the crowd made a single sound, low and vast, like the sea shifting. And then a second cry went up, louder than the first. The loveliest girl in the land was dancing. The loveliest girl in the land was singing. Whoever had stayed home now came running. The square could hold no more, and still more arrived, pressing in from the side streets, climbing onto carts and low walls, straining for a glimpse of her. Every eye in that town was aimed at one point. Every mind had left its own life behind for the afternoon. Through this crowd, a man was about to walk. The Buddha, telling this story to his monks, described him with great care. He was a man who wanted to live. He wanted happiness and turned away from pain, the way every person listening to this does, the way you do. Nothing about him was unusual. He had woken that morning expecting an ordinary day, with its small plans and small worries, its assumption of a tomorrow and a tomorrow after that. He was, in every way that matters, one of us. Picture his morning before any of this found him. He had eaten something without tasting it, because his mind was on an errand he needed to finish before dark. He had passed a neighbor and returned the greeting without hearing it. He had walked the first streets of his day the way you and I walk ours, body moving through the town while the mind ran ahead to the afternoon, circled back to an old worry, ran ahead again. If you had stopped him and asked whether he was awake, he would have laughed and said, "Of course." His eyes were open. His feet knew the way. By the standard most of us use, he was awake, and by the standard he was about to discover, he had been sleepwalking through his entire life. Then came the order. A bowl was placed in his hands, a wide bowl filled with oil, filled to the very brim. The oil stood so high that its surface trembled with his pulse. A held breath could steady it. A careless step could break it. He was told to carry this bowl through the square, through the thickest part of the crowd, directly between all those people and the girl they had come to see, and he was to spill nothing. Then he heard the second half of the command. A soldier stepped in behind him and drew his sword. The blade stayed bare, carried low, close enough that the man could hear it move when the soldier moved. The terms were simple and they were final. Wherever a single drop of oil fell, in that very place, the sword would fall too. One drop, and his head would leave his shoulders before the oil finished soaking into the dust. Take a moment and stand inside his body as the first step is taken. The heart slamming, the hands suddenly foreign, as if they belonged to someone less careful. The surface of the oil magnifying every tremor, reporting his fear back to him in tiny rings that spread from the center and died against the rim. Behind him, footsteps that matched his own. Ahead of him, 1,000 shoulders and elbows, a moving wall of bodies that did not know he existed and would not part for him. And here, the story begins to do its quiet work. Because within a few steps, something in the man began to change. The crowd was still roaring, and he stopped hearing it as sound directed at anything. It became weather, a wind he moved through. The music, the drums, the singing that had emptied every house in town, all of it slid to the far edge of his awareness and stayed there, present and completely unimportant. The famous dancer performed 30 feet from him, and he never saw her. To this day, in the story, he has never seen her. His world had contracted to the size of a bowl of oil, and inside that small world, he was more awake than he had ever been in his life. Feel the walk itself, the way he learned, within minutes, to place each foot with the whole of his attention, rolling the weight from heel to toe so slowly that his body barely disturbed the air. The way his breathing changed on its own, dropping low into his belly, long and even, because a high, fast breath shook the oil, and his body understood that before his mind did. The way his eyes softened, holding the bright disk of the oil's surface and the ground ahead in a single field of view, missing nothing, grasping at nothing. Someone jostled toward him, and he flowed around the man like water around a stone, the bowl level, the surface calm. He had become, step by step, a moving stillness at the center of the loudest afternoon of the year. notice what the sword had done to him. It had taken a scattered, ordinary mind, the kind that plans dinner while walking and rehearses arguments while eating, and it had gathered every wandering piece of it into one place. Fear had been the doorway, and he had walked through the doorway into something on the other side of fear. Precision, clarity, a silence inside him that the crowd could not touch. His life had been reduced to the present moment, and in that reduction he discovered how large the present moment actually is. He could feel the warmth of the day on the back of his neck. He could feel the fine grit of the road through his sandals, each pebble announcing itself and passing away. The weight of the bowl had turned from a burden into a kind of companion, an honest weight, telling him exactly where his hands were and exactly what they were doing. Somewhere behind him, death kept pace, patient, indifferent, and rather than draining the color out of the world, its presence had turned the color up. He had never been so close to dying. He had never been so completely alive. Somewhere near the middle of the square, the story reaches its most dangerous moment, though no teller needs to spell it out, because anyone who has ever carried anything full knows it happened. The song ended. The crowd surged all at once toward the stage, roaring for more, and a shoulder struck him hard from the left. The oil leapt. It climbed the side of the bowl in one bright wave, curled at the rim, hung there for a heartbeat that contained his entire existence. And his hands, without waiting for instructions, dipped and turned and gave way beneath the wave, absorbing its force the way a branch absorbs a landing bird, and the oil settled back, whole. He stood still for 3 breaths. Then he walked on. The moment had shown him the deepest secret of the practice, which is that a slip beginning is different from a slip completed, and the space between them belongs entirely to a mind that is present enough to use it. Understand, too, why the bowl was filled to the very brim, because the Buddha chose that detail deliberately. A half-full bowl forgives. It grants margins, allows carelessness, lets a distracted carrier believe that a little sloshing costs nothing. A brimful bowl tells the truth about a human life. There is no spare capacity in your days. Every hour arrives once, filled to its own edge, and is either received or lost. The afternoon you spent absent from your own child's story about school did not wait in reserve for a better version of you. It spilled. It soaked into the dust of that day, and no swordsman was needed to make the loss real. The Buddha never says whether the man reached the far side of the square. The story simply stops, mid-walk, with the bowl still full and the sword still drawn. He asked his monks a single question instead. Would that man, for even one moment, let his attention wander from the bowl and drift out toward the spectacle around him? The monks answered at once that he would not. He could not. His life depended on where his mind was. Then the Buddha opened the story like a hand opening. The bowl of oil, he told them, filled to the brim and carried through the crowd, stands for mindfulness of the body. Awareness resting in this body, here, steady, carried carefully through the middle of a distracting world. Train yourselves this way, he said. Carry your attention the way that man carried his oil. It is worth pausing on the method here, on why a teacher of his depth reached for a story instead of a command. He could have said, simply, be mindful of the body at all times, and the sentence would have been accurate and nearly useless. Instructions enter through the front door of the mind, where they are examined, filed, and quietly forgotten by dinner. A story enters through the skin. 2,500 years after that afternoon, you can still feel the trembling surface of the oil, still hear the sword whisper in its keeper's hand, still sense your own shoulders steadying as the man's steps steady. Your body has been practicing alongside him for the last several minutes without being asked. That was the design. The teaching was built to be lived through rather than learned, which is why it has outlasted every empire that existed on the day it was first spoken. Sit with the shape of that teaching for a moment, because every piece of the story is aimed directly at your life. You are carrying a bowl. You have been carrying it since the morning you were born. The bowl is your attention, your capacity to be present inside your own existence, and it is filled to the brim because a human life is filled to the brim. Every hour arrives full of sensation, full of other people, full of small chances to be exactly where you are. Whether any of it is actually received depends on where the bowl is, and whether it is level, and whether you have noticed that you are holding it at all. And you are walking through a crowd. Your crowd is louder than the one he faced. His crowd stood in one square and shouted about one dancer. Yours lives in your pocket and follows you into every room, including the room where you sleep. It shouts about 1,000 dancers a day, news that expires by evening, opinions from strangers you will never meet, the endless performance of other people's lives, arranged and lit to look better than yours. Every one of these is a cry going through the town, and every one of them is designed to do exactly what the cry in the story did, to pull you out of your own life and press you into the crowd, face turned toward a spectacle, bowl forgotten in your hands, oil running over your fingers unnoticed. Stand back from the square for a moment and look at the whole scene, the way the Buddha invited his monks to look at it, because there is a second teaching hidden in the wide shot. 1,000 people came to that square to feel alive. That is what a spectacle promises, a few hours of intensity borrowed from someone else's shining. And they stood there, pressed together, eyes forward, each one absent from their own body, their own breath, their own unrepeatable afternoon. The aliveness they had walked miles for was moving straight through the middle of them, carried in a wooden bowl by a man none of them noticed. The crowd was entertained. The man was awake. The distance between those two conditions looks small from the outside, and it is the whole distance, the one this entire video keeps measuring from different directions. Which brings us to the sword. Here is the part of the story most people flinch away from, and it is the part that holds the medicine. The sword is real. There is one walking behind you today. The Buddha placed a swordsman in the story because a swordsman walks behind every human being who has ever lived, patient, silent, never in a hurry, never off duty. Your death has kept pace with you through every year you have been alive. It was there during your childhood summers. It is there in the room with you now, unhurried and certain. This can be said gently, because it has always been true, and hearing it changes nothing about the facts. It only changes whether you live as someone who knows. Most people spend enormous energy trying to forget the swordsman. The forgetting takes work. It has to be renewed daily, topped up with busyness and noise and plans stacked on plans, because the truth keeps leaking back in, through a doctor's waiting room, through a phone call about someone your age, through the strange silence of 3 a.m. And the forgetting costs more than it protects. A person who has hidden death from themselves has also hidden the value of an hour. Hours become disposable to them. They spill their attention everywhere. A drop into resentment, a drop into scrolling, a drop into arguments that decide nothing, because they believe the bowl refills forever. The man in the story had lost that belief before his first step, and losing it made him unable to waste a single one. Watch carefully what fear did and did not do to him, because the difference matters enormously in your own life. Raw panic would have killed him within 10 steps. Panic shakes the hands. Panic sends the mind racing into imagined futures, the sword falling, the crowd gasping, and a mind that is watching an imagined future has abandoned the actual bowl in the actual present. What saved him was something quieter that lives on the far side of panic. Full acknowledgement. Yes, the sword is there. Yes, one drop is enough. And because both facts were fully admitted, they stopped needing his attention, and the whole of his mind became available for the one thing he could actually do, which was to take this step and then this one. That is the difference between anxiety about death and awareness of death, and the two could hardly be further apart. Anxiety scatters. It flings attention into futures that have not arrived, rehearsing losses that cannot be rehearsed. Awareness gathers. It brings everything home to the present, because the present is where a mortal being actually lives, and it is the only place one ever will. The Buddha built this story so his monks could feel that difference from the inside, and so you could feel it tonight, lying wherever you are lying, breathing whatever breath you are breathing. So how does a person carry the bowl, here, in a life with no soldier and no square? You begin with the body, exactly as the teaching says, because the body is the one part of you that never leaves the present moment. Your thoughts visit last Tuesday and next year. Your body stays here, faithfully, breathing and weighing and touching the world, and any time you rest your attention inside it, you have picked the bowl back up. Feel the points where your body meets whatever holds it right now. Feel the small tide of your breath, rising and falling without any instruction from you. That simple contact is the level bowl. That is the whole beginning of the practice, humble as it sounds. And the man in the square was doing nothing more advanced than this while he outwalked his own death. There is a reason the teaching points to the body rather than to the mind watching itself. Thoughts are slippery to hold. Try to grip one and it becomes another thought, and then a thought about that one, and within seconds you are 5 rooms away from where you started with no memory of the doors. Sensation behaves differently. The weight of your own hands can be felt for as long as you care to feel it. The breath offers itself again with perfect reliability, roughly 15 times a minute, over 20,000 times a day, more chances to come home than any person could ever exhaust. The body is the handle on the bowl. The Buddha pointed to it because it is the one part of your equipment that cannot wander, and a traveler learns to navigate by whatever does not move. Consider how the first hour of an ordinary modern day usually goes, and count the drops. The alarm sounds, and before both eyes are open, a hand has found the phone. Within 90 seconds, the mind is processing a stranger's outrage, a headline built to alarm, 4 small requests from people who are not in the room. Coffee is made and drunk with no record of its taste. A shower passes in planning. A commute passes in replay. By the time the day officially begins, a full hour of a numbered life has been handed over to the crowd, and the person has been present for almost none of it. Now run the same hour with the bowl in hand, waking and feeling the warmth of the blankets for 3 honest breaths before moving. Coffee tasted, water felt, a window looked through instead of past. The hour costs nothing extra. The same tasks fill it. All that changes is that someone was there while it happened, and that change, multiplied across a life, is the difference between having lived and having been alive somewhere nearby. Then you carry it into motion, because the story is a story about walking, about staying present while life moves and crowds press in. Tomorrow you will wash something, or walk somewhere, or listen to a person you love telling you about their day. Each of these is a stretch of the square. Try carrying the bowl through just one of them. Feel the water on your hands as if the feeling mattered. Feel your feet meeting the ground, heel to toe, the way his did. Give the person in front of you the whole of your eyes and ears, and notice how rare that gift has become, and how instantly the other person can feel it. Some of the oil will spill. Your mind will bolt toward the dancer 40 times in a minute, because that is what untrained minds do, and no sword falls when it happens. You simply notice and level the bowl and take the next step. Every return is the practice. Every return is a drop saved. The people who share your life can tell where your bowl is by the way. They have always been able to tell. A child talking to a parent whose eyes keep sliding toward a screen learns something in that moment that no later apology fully unteaches. A friend across a table knows within seconds whether they are being heard or merely waited out. Presence has become so scarce between people that offering it now lands, almost like love itself, and in truth the two have never been far apart. When the teaching asks you to stay with the body through the noise of the world, it is also quietly repairing every relationship you will sit inside for the rest of your life, because the person who can stay with a breath can stay with a face, and staying with a face is most of what the people who love you ever wanted. Here, too, what this story does to the idea of a wasted life, the fear that sits underneath so many restless days. Most people picture waste as idleness, as years that produce too little, and they try to outrun it with fuller calendars. The square suggests a different accounting. 1,000 busy people were in it, and they were all absent. One man was doing something absurdly simple, and he was entirely there. Waste, in this light, means absence. An hour of quiet rest, fully inhabited, holds more life than a frantic year that nobody was home for. You do not need a grander schedule to stop wasting your life. You need to be present inside the one you already have. And slowly, the paradox at the center of this story starts to unfold in your own chest. The highest stakes produce the deepest calm. You would expect the opposite. You would expect that admitting the sword would flood a life with dread, and that peace would require looking away. The man in the square proves the reverse, and so does every person who has ever sat by the bed of someone dying and noticed, with amazement, how vivid the world became in those weeks. How good bread tasted. How beautiful an ordinary window full of ordinary light turned out to be. Mortality, honestly held, concentrates a life the way the sword concentrated his walk. It burns off the trivial. It hands you back your own hours with their true weight restored, and their true weight is immense. Let one worry be set down before it can pick itself up. A practice built around a sword can sound severe, as if the Buddha were recruiting you into a life of grim vigilance where every lapse is a small disgrace. The story teaches the opposite temperature. Notice that the man never once turned around to glare at the soldier, never spent a step on guilt for the trembling of his first few yards, never punished himself for the wave that nearly crested the rim. Self-attack is just another dancer. The mind that berates itself for being distracted has simply found a more respectable distraction, and the oil spills exactly as fast while the lecture runs. The carrying is gentle or it fails. Soft hands hold a full bowl better than clenched ones, and a kind attention returns to the present far faster than a scolded one. When you drift tomorrow, and you will, come back the way he absorbed the wave, smoothly, without commentary, as if returning were the most natural movement in the world, because it is. Think of what the crowd saw that afternoon, those few who happened to glance away from the stage. They saw a man moving slowly through the chaos, carrying something with both hands. His face was quiet. His steps were unhurried. In the middle of 1,000 people shouting, he looked like the only person at rest, and in a way, that is exactly what he was. None of them could see the sword. None of them knew that the calmest man in the square was the one walking closest to death. They would have called his life the most terrifying in that town, and inside his own experience, it had become the most simple. One bowl, one step, this step. And before the mind objects that such steadiness belongs to rare people, notice that you have already done this. You have carried a 2 full cup of tea across a room and arrived without a drop lost, your whole being gathered into your hands for 10 unbroken seconds. You have threaded a needle, caught a falling glass, carried a sleeping child up a dark staircase with your attention wrapped around every stair. The capacity is native to you. It has simply been waiting for you to consider your ordinary hours worth carrying with the same hands. That figure, moving level and awake through the noise, is what this whole video is pointing you toward. You will not be given his soldier. You have already been given everything else: the crowd, the bowl, the quiet companion keeping pace behind you, and the same choice he faced with every step, the choice of where the mind will live. An hour from now, or tomorrow, at some unremarkable moment, you will feel your attention being pulled toward one more spectacle, and you will remember him, and something in you will level the bowl without being told. That small correction, repeated across the years you have left, is a changed life. The man in the square knew exactly what he was. A fragile being, carrying something precious, with limited time. His clarity came from that knowledge fitting him perfectly, the way skin fits. There is another way to walk through the world, wearing a covering that was never yours, collecting a respect that was never earned, and the forest is about to go silent for a creature who tried it. The barley field went quiet first. A hare froze mid-step at the field's edge, then vanished in 3 heartbeats of grey. Birds lifted out of the grain in a single silver sheet and did not come back. At the far fence, the village watchman took one look at the shape moving through the morning mist, low and tawny and unhurried, and walked quickly in the other direction, whispering the word that emptied fields. Lion. And the shape in the mist lowered its head and ate the young barley and felt the silence spread around it like a robe being laid across its shoulders. No creature within half a mile dared to breathe loudly. The whole green world had rearranged itself around one animal's presence. Under the great cat's golden hide, in the warm dark where no one could see, stood a donkey. He belonged to a travelling hawker, a man who moved from village to village selling pots and cloth and small bright things, and the donkey carried all of it. That had been the entire shape of his life. Loads in the morning, roads through the heat of the day, the bite of the rope, the flat taste of whatever grew along the roadside after the good grass was behind fences. He knew the weight of every kind of merchandise by the ache it left. He knew the particular whistle that meant walk on and the particular shout that meant faster, and he had learned, as beasts of burden learn, that wanting things was pointless and that the road simply continued. The skin had been the hawker's idea, and as ideas go, it was brilliant and it was cheap. He had bought the lion's hide somewhere along his route, paid less for it than for a good blanket, and he had noticed what everyone notices, that the world responds to the surface of a thing long before it checks what is underneath. So in the evenings, when he stopped outside a village, he would drape the hide over his donkey and turn him loose into the ripest field he could find. Watchmen guard fields against animals they can chase away. Nobody chases a lion. The donkey ate the best grain of the district all night, every night, free of charge, And in the morning, the hawker collected a well-fed animal and moved on before anyone found the courage to look closely. The scheme worked in village after village. It worked so well that neither of them, the man or the animal, ever paused to ask what the scheme was quietly doing to the one who wore the skin. Notice, before the story moves on, whose hands put the hide there. The donkey never chose the lion. The costume was draped over him by someone who profited from the draping, a hand that collected the benefit while the animal underneath carried the risk. And this detail reaches further into human life than it first appears. Very few people sew their fur skin themselves. A father drapes the hide of toughness over a small boy and praises the fit every time the boy swallows his tears. A family drapes the hide of the achiever over a daughter and feeds on the reflected shine. An industry drapes the hide of tireless confidence over its young and quietly harvests the overwork that maintaining it requires. By adulthood, most people are wearing at least one skin they never remember putting on, tailored by hands that had their own reasons, and part of growing up, in the deepest sense the teaching intends, is turning around to see whose scheme the costume originally served. The hawker walked away from that rice field unharmed, as hawkers generally do. The bill for a borrowed identity is always delivered to the one inside it. Because something was happening under that hide, and it happened slowly, the way all the important corruptions happen. The first night, the donkey ate nervously, ears swiveling inside the costume, certain that at any moment the shout would come and the sticks would follow. The shout never came. The second week, he noticed that he had stopped flinching. He walked into guarded fields the way a king walks into his own hall, and the silence that greeted him had begun to taste better than the barley. Respect, even counterfeit respect, is a powerful drug for any creature that has spent its life at the bottom of every hierarchy it ever stood in. For the first time since he was a foal, nothing was demanded of him. Nothing struck him. Nothing even dared approach. The world stepped back and bowed and held its breath, and he began, in the deep, wordless place where animals and people keep their sense of what they are, to believe. Watch the belief settle in, because this is the hinge of the whole story. His posture changed. He carried his head differently inside the great-maned hood, higher, slower, with the unhurried gravity of a creature that has never once been ordered to do anything. He stopped remembering the feel of the pack saddle. The memory of the rope faded the way pain fades, completely, leaving only a vague sense that life before the skin had been someone else's life, some smaller animal's story that no longer applied. When he passed a puddle, he saw gold shoulders and a dark mane, and the eyes looking out of the reflection did not seem like borrowed eyes. The skin had stopped feeling like a garment. It weighed nothing now. It fit. That, right there, was the moment the trap closed, and it closed without a sound, because the most complete prisons are the ones the prisoner decorates. One detail from that season deserves its own moment of stillness. Somewhere along the route, the hawkers rode past a paddock where other donkeys stood in the afternoon heat, switching flies, waiting for loads, living the life that had been his own only weeks before. and the creature in the lion's skin looked away from them, and what moved in him as he did it was embarrassment. Their long ears embarrassed him. Their patient eyes and dusty flanks embarrassed him, because they showed him a family portrait he was trying to burn. This is the costume's deepest violence, and it happens inside every wearer eventually. The disguise begins by deceiving strangers and ends by turning its owner against his own kind, against his own history, against the very creature it exists to protect. A being who is ashamed of what he is will accept any weight of falseness rather than set it down, and shame, the Buddha understood, is the thread every mask hangs from. The hawker noticed only that his donkey was fat and his purse was safe. The villagers noticed only that a lion passed through their fields and mercifully kept moving. Weeks stacked into a season, a creature built for burdens spent his nights as visiting royalty, and if you had asked him, in whatever language runs beneath language, whether he was happy, he would have said yes with his whole chest. He had everything. He had eaten his fill in 100 forbidden fields. The one thing the arrangement could never give him was the one thing he no longer knew he was missing. A single moment in which anything in this world had ever loved, or feared, or even seen the actual donkey. Then came the village that talked to itself. Word had moved down the road faster than the hawker did. A lion that ate barley. A lion that harmed no goat and took no calf, that appeared at dusk and grazed like a cow, night after night, field after field. The farmers of this village sat together in the smoke of an evening fire and turned the strangeness over in their hands. Fear had kept every other village indoors. Here, fear had begun to curdle into suspicion, and suspicion is braver than courage. They armed themselves with staves and drums and horns, and when the tawny shape appeared in the young rice at moonrise, they did not run. They spread out along the field's edge in a wide, tightening arc, torchlight jumping along the line, and they began to close in on the thing they had decided to look at properly. The donkey lifted his head into the noise, and here the story arrives at its terrible, perfect moment. Drums on 3 sides, fire throwing shadows the size of hills. A true lion would have answered that provocation with the sound that flattens grass, the roar that begins somewhere below the earth and arrives in the bones of everything living. And the creature in the lion's skin was frightened and cornered and full of a feeling too big to hold, and so he did the only thing his body had ever known how to do with a feeling too big to hold. He opened his mouth, and from inside the king of beasts came the long, sawing, unmistakable bray of a donkey. The sound went out over the rice in the still night air, and the arc of torches stopped moving. Then a voice laughed. One voice, then 10, then the whole line, and the laughter was worse than the drums, because drums fear you and laughter has finished with you. They came through the crop at a run. The staves rose and fell, and the crowd that would have fled a braying field thief in a donkey's own skin beat this one with the fury people reserve for those who have made them afraid for nothing. The lion's hide was torn away in the trampled rice, and under it they found exactly what the bray had promised: grey flanks, long ears, a beast of burden lying in the mud of his borrowed kingdom. By the time the field was quiet again, the donkey was dead. The hawker came looking at first light, as he had come on 100 profitable mornings, rope in hand, whistling the whistle that meant time to work. He found the trampled rice first, then the torn hide lying apart from the body like a discarded argument, then the animal that had carried his whole livelihood on its back for years. The scheme had ended the way schemes built on another being's falseness tend to end. Suddenly, and with the bill arriving at an address the schemer never expected. He walked on to the next village that day carrying his own packs, and the story does not record that he understood anything at all. A farmer had watched it all from the edge of the crowd, an old man the village considered wise, and when the others fell silent, he spoke into the smoke and torchlight. "That was never a lion's voice," he said. "A lion's voice remakes the air. That was a donkey's cry coming out of a lion's shape, and the shape was only ever going to hold until the voice came out." He said it without cruelty, the way wise people state the mechanics of a thing, and his words outlived everyone in that field, because the Buddha himself would one day tell this story to his monks and let that farmer's observations stand at the center of it. And when the telling was done, the Buddha set a question down in front of the gathered monks and left it there, the way he left all his sharpest questions, unpadded. How long can any being carry an identity it has borrowed before its true nature calls out? He was looking, the old accounts say, at men in robes when he asked it, men who had shaved their heads and taken the outer form of holiness, and he was reminding them of something that applies with equal force to every costume ever worn. The robe does not make the monk. The title does not make the leader. The skin, however golden, however convincing, however long the world bows to it, confers nothing on the creature inside. He put the same truth into verse elsewhere, in lines his followers have recited for 100 generations. A person still churning with greed and falseness, he taught, is unworthy of the saffron robe no matter how correctly it hangs from the shoulders, while the one who has grown steady in truth and self-command wears it rightly, whatever their past. Read those lines slowly and something startling surfaces. The robe itself was never the problem. Cloth is innocent. Titles are innocent. Even the lion's hide, lying in some market stall before the hawker bought it, was only a dead animal's coat. The corruption enters at the moment the outer thing is asked to do the inner thing's work, the moment fabric is asked to supply virtue, or a job grade is asked to supply worth, or a curated image is asked to supply a self. Surfaces make honest servants and catastrophic masters, and every wisdom tradition on earth eventually arrives at that same sentence, though few said it earlier or more cleanly than this one. Hold the image of an actual lion beside the story for a moment, because the contrast carries half the teaching. A real lion has never once wondered whether it is a lion. It performs no maintenance on its lionhood. It checks no reflection, manages no impression, wastes no part of any day monitoring the distance at which observers stand. It simply is what it is, with a completeness so total that the being and the appearance were never two separate things needing to be kept in agreement. That effortlessness is the signature of everything genuine, in animals and in people. You have met human beings like this, and you remember the strange rest that came over you in their company. Around them, your own seams loosened, because there was visibly nothing to perform for. Their kindness ran all the way down. Their word and their life matched, like a footprint matches a foot. The teaching calls a person toward exactly that condition, a self so honestly grown that wearing it costs nothing, and the first step toward it has always been the same, noticing where the costume chafes. Now carry the field into your own life, because you have stood in it, and so has everyone you know. Consider what the skins look like here. A job title that gets repeated at parties a little too quickly. The vocabulary of an expertise worn like a mane, impressive at a distance, thin where it counts. A feed of photographs curated down from 100 takes, a marriage presented smiling, a calm professional voice stretched over a chest full of static. The confident opinions borrowed whole from someone braver. The busyness performed for an audience that is itself performing. Each of these does exactly what the lion's hide did. It manages the distance at which other people stop looking. And each one teaches its wearer the same slow lesson the donkey learned, that the applause aimed at the surface never once lands on the being underneath, and some hungry part of that being keeps the count. Let one such field come into focus, because you may be standing in it this week. A woman sits in a glass conference room on a Tuesday morning, respected, senior, 11 years into a career the whole family brags about. Around the table, terms are flying that she half knows, and she nods at each one with the small, confident nod she perfected years ago, the nod that says, of course, continue. Inside the nod, a voice she has carried since her first week keeps up its old whisper, that everyone else reads something she missed, that the seniority was luck compounding, that one direct question aimed at the right spot would open the hide down the middle in front of everyone. She is fed and feared and utterly unknown, grazing in her glass field, and the meeting ends and the mane holds and she carries it out to the elevator, where 4 other people are carrying theirs. The rooms of the modern world are full of lions like this, nodding at each other across polished tables, each one privately certain of being the only donkey in the building. Feel the actual cost of the costume, because the story measures it precisely. The donkey's tragedy was never really the beating. His tragedy was the season before it, the golden weeks he would have called the best of his life, in which he was fed and feared and utterly unknown. Every night in the barley was a night no creature on earth was in relationship with him. The birds fled a lion. The watchman dreaded a lion. Even his own reflection showed him a stranger. He had achieved the perfect success of every disguise, total invisibility at the very center of attention. And if you have ever stood in a room full of your own reputation and felt completely alone, you have grazed in his field. There is an exhaustion that goes with this, and most people carry it for years without naming it. A skin must be maintained. The seams need checking every morning. Conversations become terrain to manage, full of subjects that might expose the underside, and so the wearer steers, and hedges, and keeps certain people at certain distances, and the steering never gets a day off. Psychologists hear it constantly from the most outwardly accomplished people in any room, the quiet certainty of being one bray away from discovery. The Buddha heard it too, 2.5 millennia earlier, which is why the story exists. The fear of being found out is the tax on every borrowed identity, collected daily, and it rises with the quality of the skin. Now look closely at the bray itself, because the story hides its mercy there. The bray was the truest thing in that field. Every other sound of that night was strategy. The drums calculated, the horns calculated, the silence of the disguise itself, one long calculation. The bray alone came straight up from the animal's actual nature, unplanned, unstoppable, alive. Your own nature does the same thing. It leaks through the costume in moments you do not choose, in what makes you laugh before you can arrange your face, in the subjects that pull you into real speech, in the tears that arrive at the wrong meeting, in the kindness you commit when nobody useful is watching. Most people treat these leaks as malfunctions and reinforce the seams. The teaching invites the opposite reading. The bray is your life trying to reach you. It is the donkey saying, "From under all that gold, I am still here, and I would rather be beaten as myself than crowned as someone else." And here is what the donkey never got to learn, the knowledge his death brought and handed down the centuries to you. The exposure he spent his golden season dreading turns out, for human beings who choose it voluntarily, to feel like the opposite of dying. Ask anyone who has finally said "I don't actually know" in a room where they were being paid to know. Ask anyone who has told a friend the unphotographed version of their marriage, or admitted the fear under the confident voice, or let the tears arrive at the meeting and simply continued speaking. What comes is almost never the staves. What comes, nearly always, is the strange rush of air into a space that has been sealed for years, and other people leaning closer instead of away, because your bray gives every donkey within earshot permission to stop roaring. Human beings do not bond over each other's manes. They bond in the mud, grey flank to grey flank, and everything in your life that is actually load-bearing was built there. And here is a secret about the people closest to you, offered gently, because it dismantles the whole project of the skin from the inside. They have already heard your bray. Years ago, many times. The person who shares your home has watched the mane slip in 100 unguarded moments, in sickness, in sleep, in the minute after bad news arrived, and the friends who have lasted are precisely the ones who caught the real sound and stayed. Whatever they love it with the bray already factored in. The audience you maintain the costume for has, in other words, largely seen through it and voted to remain, which means much of the daily labor of concealment is a performance for people who bought their tickets to see the donkey. Letting them say so, letting yourself be caught on purpose now and then, is one of the quietest forms of rest this life offers. Which returns us to the old farmer's mechanics, and to the only disguise the teaching endorses. The Buddha never told his monks to perfect a better skin. He told them to grow the thing that needs none. genuine kindness cannot be torn off in a rice field. Courage that has been earned in 1,000 small, honest moments does not check its seams in the morning. Truthfulness needs no maintenance budget at all, because it has no underside to guard, and a person built of these things can be searched by any crowd with any torches and only become more visible as what they are. This is slower than buying a hide. A skin is acquired in an afternoon, and nature is cultivated the way a field is cultivated, season over season, one honest act at a time, and the harvest is a life that no exposure can end. The cultivation begins smaller than anyone expects. Tomorrow will hand you a dozen tiny junctions where the main and the truth point in slightly different directions, and almost all of them will be low stakes enough to practice on. Someone recommends a book, and the main says claim to have read it, and the truth costs 4 words. I haven't read it. Someone asks how you are, in a doorway, in passing, and once in a while, with the right person, the truth can be allowed to answer instead of the receptionist you keep at that door. A colleague uses the term you have nodded at for 2 years, and you ask what it means, and the ceiling does not fall, and something under your ribs unclenches by a degree you can physically feel. Each of these is one stitch of the hide left unsewn. None of them will be noticed by anyone, and together, across a year of ordinary days, they change what it feels like to wake up in your life, because the animal underneath begins to trust that it will be allowed out, and an animal that trusts this stops kicking at the walls of its owner at 3 in the morning. The video you are inside of keeps circling one truth from different heights, and the donkey's story banks toward it now. Your time is brutally finite. The man with the bowl knew it and it woke him up. The donkey never learnt it, and so he spent what turned out to be the final season of his one existence being admired for something he was not, which is the most complete way ever devised of not existing at all. People at the end of their lives perform an accounting, and those who sit with the dying report the same entry appearing again and again near the top of the regrets, the years spent living as the expected creature instead of the actual one. Nobody on that final bed asks for the skin to be brought closer. The main, the titles, the maintained impression, all of it stands revealed as freight that was carried up a long road for no one. What the dying reach for is every moment they were truly met, and you can only be met as what you are. There is one more turn of the knife in this story, and it deserves to be felt rather than hurried past. The nights in the barley were the freest nights the donkey ever had. Every rope was off, every load was down. The hawker slept a mile away, the fields lay open under the moon, and for those hours the animal answered to absolutely no one. He could have been most fully a donkey in exactly those hours, rolling in the cool dust, braying at the stars for the plain joy of the sound. Instead, he spent his freedom impersonating his captor's opposite, stiff inside a dead cat's coat, performing for an audience of frightened strangers. You have such hours too. Evenings, when every obligation has finally released you. Weekends, the small clearings in the calendar where nobody is grading anything. Watch what walks into those clearings. If the performance follows you even there, curating the leisure, polishing the relaxation for an invisible jury. Then the skin has grown past costume into confinement, and the freest hours of a short life are being fed to it. And notice, finally, the one variable in the whole story that was ever within the donkey's control. The bray was always going to come out. True nature does not offer a permanent suppression option in animals or in anyone. The only open question, ever, was timing, whether the truth would emerge on his terms in some safe grey dawn, or on the world's terms, at the worst possible moment, ringed by torches. Life runs the same policy with people. What is hidden picks its own exit if it is never given a door, and it has terrible taste in moments. The practice of small voluntary honesty is, at bottom, simply choosing the timing yourself, letting the truth out in rooms you trust, at a volume you set, before the years assemble their drums. So somewhere in the days ahead, the drums will close in on some small field of your life, a conversation, a meeting, a question aimed just under your seams, and you will feel the old instinct reach for the mane. Remember the grey creature in the moonlit rice, and let a little of your true voice out on purpose, gently, before the years do it for you. What answers you will not be laughter. It will be recognition, the warmest sound a human field can make. For now, wherever you are resting, there is no field and no torchlight and nothing at all to maintain. This hour asks for no performance. Whatever skin you carried through today can lie where you dropped it by the door, and the creature underneath, the plain, tired, unphotographed one, is entirely welcome here. Let your breath come the way the bray came, unarranged, in your own true voice. It has been waiting all day to be allowed. A donkey with one short life spent it pretending, and the pretense stole the whole thing. Long before that story was first told, a teacher stood in front of his students and tried to show them exactly how short the thing being stolen actually is, and the pictures he reached for were so small and so ordinary that no one who heard them ever saw a morning the same way again. A single drop of dew hangs at the tip of a blade of grass. It formed in the dark, slowly, the night's coolness gathering itself into one clear bead, and now it hangs there holding the whole grey sky upside down inside its curve. The light is coming. Somewhere below the horizon, the morning is already moving toward this exact blade of grass, and when it arrives, the drop will shine for a little while like something precious, and then it will be gone as if it had never formed at all. Long before the Buddha walked, in an age so distant that his own listeners had to take it on faith, a teacher named Araka stood before his students in the early morning and pointed at exactly that. He was a teacher of great attainment. The old account says, a man who had set aside the hungers that run most lives, and hundreds of students walked long roads to sit in his mornings. They came expecting elevated things, doctrines with architecture, answers sized to match their journey. What he gave them, day after day, was a handful of the smallest sights in the world. A drop of dew, a bubble in the rain, a cow walking down a road. He had discovered that enormous truths refuse to enter through the front of the mind, and so he carried them in through the side door of ordinary things. And no student who truly saw one of his pictures ever managed to unsee it. Consider what those students carried up the road with them, because it will feel familiar. Each one arrived hauling an invisible list, the list every human being keeps, of things to be done once conditions improve. One would begin his real practice after the harvest. One would mend things with his brother after the anger cooled a little more. One was waiting to deserve the teaching before fully receiving it, a postponement so refined it looked like humility. They were young, most of them, or felt young, and time to them was like water to a fish, the medium itself, invisible because it was everywhere. Arika read all of this in their faces the way old teachers read faces, and he understood that arguing with a someday is useless because a someday has no address where an argument can be delivered. So he never argued. He pointed. The teaching underneath every picture was one sentence, spoken plainly, without softening. The life of human beings is short. It is brief and fleeting, and it carries hardship in its baggage, and no one who is born gets out of dying. Therefore, he told them, understand this wisely while understanding is still possible. Do good, live cleanly and awake. Then he would lift his hand toward the grass at their feet and begin. Look at the dewdrop, he said. It has one morning. The night labored to make it, perfect and round and briefly indestructible looking, and the first strong light will take it back. It does not get a second morning to shine better, or a chance to hang from a more important blade of grass, or an extension for good behavior. A human life, Arika told his students, hangs the same way. Hanging, shining, already warming. The students looked at the wet field, thousands of drops burning silver as the light touched them, a whole generation of them due to vanish within the hour, and somewhere in each student the sentence stopped being philosophy. Then the rain picture. When the big drops of the monsoon strike a puddle, he said, bubbles leap up, each one a small glass dome, and each one bursts almost in the instant of its forming. Watch a puddle in the rain and you are watching a crowd, arriving and vanishing, arriving and vanishing, no bubble ever consulting the others about a better arrangement. This is the pace of it, Arika said. From where a long-lived being sits, whole human generations rise and catch the light and are gone at the speed of rain on water, and every bubble, while it lasts, is fully convinced it is the exception. You have seen the puddle yourself, though it was disguised as a photograph. Somewhere in your family there is a picture, brown or faded or scanned from an album, of people standing stiffly in their best clothes, great-grandparents, their siblings, a wedding party of strangers who share your jaw or your eyes. Every person in that photograph woke up on the morning it was taken with a full day of concerns, a toothache, a debt, a secret hope about someone across the room. Their world was as loud and as permanent feeling to them as yours is to you tonight. They are the bubbles of a rain that fell before you formed, and one day, a person not yet born will hold a picture of this year of your life and feel the same soft vertigo. Araka's students could only imagine the puddle. You own photographic proof, and it sits in a drawer being ignored, which tells you everything about how skilled the mind is at not seeing what it is looking at. Then he took a stick and drew a line across the surface of a bowl of water and asked his students what remained. The line closed behind the stick as it was being drawn. There was never a moment when the line fully existed, the beginning already healing while the end was still being made. So it is with the days, he said. You cannot stack them. You cannot bank them or return to inspect them. Each one is a stroke drawn on water, real while the stick moves, and the water keeps no records. Whatever a day was going to mean, it has to mean while it is being drawn. Anyone who has ever tried to return to a golden time knows this picture is exact. You go back to the town where you were happy, and the streets are there and the happiness is not, because the happiness was never stored in the streets. You replay the era of the small children, or the first years of the love, or the summer everything was ahead of you, and memory hands you a copy of a copy, thinner each time, the way a line redrawn from memory drifts from the original stroke. The water keeps no records. This lands as grief at first, and then, if you let it finish arriving, it turns around and faces forward, because the stroke being drawn right now, tonight, this voice, this resting body, is the only line that has ever been alive under the stick. The past cannot be revisited, and the present cannot be missed twice, and between those two facts sits the entire case for paying attention. The fourth picture he gave them was a sound before it was a sight, the sound every one of them knew from the high country, a mountain stream in the season of melt. It comes down fast and full, he said, carrying leaves and branches and everything that falls into it, and there is no moment, not one, in which that water stands still. Go to the stream at midnight and it is running. Come back before dawn and it never paused. A life moves like this, he told them. There is no still moment in it anywhere, no landing on the stairs where time agrees to wait while you decide, and everything you have ever called a pause, every waiting room and every someday, was water moving the whole time. The students had all stood beside such streams. They had all felt that strange dizziness of watching water that never stops, and now the dizziness had their own names on it. Sit with the stream a moment longer. Because of all 7 pictures, it aims most directly at the modern habit of living in waiting rooms. An enormous share of adult life gets spent in a peculiar posture, the posture of before. Before the degree finishes, before the mortgage eases, before the kids are older, before the promotion lands, before retirement opens its gates, and then the posture promises, then the living starts. The stream teaches the physics that the posture ignores. The water moving past you during the wait is the same water. There is no reserve channel where real life is being held back for later release. The years spent waiting to live were made of exactly the same substance as the years you were waiting for, full strength, irreplaceable, flowing at the only speed the stream has ever had. A person can spend 3 decades on the bank preparing to get wet, and the mountain does not send that water twice. The 5th picture was almost rude, and Araka chose it for exactly that reason. A person gathers, spit on the tip of the tongue, he said, and flicks it away. That much effort, that much ceremony. A human life leaves at the same cost, easily, casually, with the universe expending nothing at all in the transaction. He watched his students flinch at that one, as students had probably flinched at it for as long as he had taught, and he let the flinch stand. Dew and bubbles are beautiful, and beauty gives the mind somewhere elegant to hide. Spit offers no hiding place. He was not decorating the truth. He was delivering it. Feel where the flinch comes from, because it teaches something on its own. The picture offends the mind's favorite belief, the quiet certainty each person carries of being centrally important to the universe, a main character whose exit will surely require more ceremony than a flick of the tongue. The stars did not slow for anyone who has ever died, including the ones history remembers, and they will not slow for us. At first, hearing this feels like a demotion. Held a little longer, it starts to feel like a door opening. If the universe is keeping no score, then the exhausting performance of significance can stop. The pressure to matter loudly, to leave a mark the size of a mountain, relaxes into something human-sized and honest, the wish to be kind in the rooms you actually stand in, to the people who will actually remember. Humility, it turns out, weighs far less than importance, and a short life travels further without the extra freight. The 6th picture smelled of every kitchen his students had ever stood in. Take an iron pan, he said, heated through a full day's fire, and lay a piece of meat on it. Listen to how quickly the sizzling starts. Watch how fast the flesh tightens and shrinks and gives up its moisture to the metal. A body in time is meat in a hot pan. The heat is always on. The shrinking has been happening since the day you arrived, politely, quietly, in the joints and the skin and the eyes, and no seasoning of wealth or fame changes the physics of the pan. It was a hard picture then, and it is a hard picture now, and inside its hardness sat Araka's tenderness, because only a teacher who truly wanted his students to live would refuse this completely to flatter them. And there is a reconciliation hidden in the pan for anyone willing to receive it. Your body has been telling you the truth your whole life. The grey hair that arrived early, the knee that reports the weather, the face in the morning mirror that keeps updating without permission, all of it is the most honest correspondence you receive, and most people treat it as an insult to be managed. Whole industries exist to help you argue with the pan. The teaching suggests a different relationship entirely. Every sign of your aging is your one body keeping faith with reality on your behalf, refusing to let you sleep through your own life, even when your mind insists on trying. Seen this way, the lines around your eyes become the receipts of your youth, proof that mornings were spent, that laughter happened, that weather was walked through, and a person can learn to read their own face the way they would read a letter from an old friend who never lies. And then the last picture, the one he saved, the one with legs. A cow is being driven to slaughter, he said. She walks the road the way cows walk, unhurried, swinging her head at the smells, pausing at the green things along the ditch until the drover's stick moves her on. She does what everything alive does on a road. She takes the next step. And every single step, Araka said, every one, the idle ones and the eager ones and the ones taken while dreaming of grass, brings her closer to the slaughterhouse. There is no step available to her that leads anywhere else. Walking slowly does not change the destination. Stopping to graze does not change it. Even turning around on the road, even walking backward, spends steps from the same finite purse. So it is, he said quietly, with every being who has ever been born. Each morning you have walked, whatever else it held, was a stretch of that road, and tonight you are closer than you were when you woke. Before the picture can collapse into despair, notice what it leaves untouched, because Araka chose his images with a jeweler's precision. The destination is fixed. The road is fixed. The number of steps is written somewhere no one can read. Everything else on that road still belongs to the walker. Whether the head swings toward the smells of the morning or stays fixed on the dust, whether the green things along the ditch get tasted, whether the other animals on the road are noticed, greeted, walked beside for a while. Two beings can walk the identical stretch of road, and one arrives at the end having lived every mile of it, and the other arrives having experienced nothing at all except the anticipation of arriving. The teaching was never designed to make you stare at the slaughterhouse. It was designed to hand you back the road, mile by unrepeatable mile, which is the only thing that was ever actually yours. The account says nothing of what the students did in the silence after the seventh picture, and nothing needs to be said, because you are sitting in that silence right now, and you can feel its shape from the inside. Now, here is where the story turns, and the turn is the reason the Buddha told it at all. He gave his monks all 7 pictures, the whole dawn field of them, and then he added the detail that rearranges everything. In the age when Araka taught, he said, human beings lived 60,000 years. 60,000. A girl in that age was considered ready for marriage at 500. Sickness barely existed. The account says, a handful of minor complaints in a lifespan wide as a geological age. And into the middle of all that abundance, to people holding 60,000 years in their hands, Araka stood up each morning and said, with a straight face and total accuracy, the life of human beings is short. A dewdrop, a bubble in the rain, a line on water. If that sentence was true for them, the Buddha asked his monks, letting the arithmetic land, what is it for you? A person now who lives long, he said, lives 100 years, or a little more if the winds are kind. And And hidden inside the comparison sits a diagnosis that should end a common fantasy forever. Arika's students had 60,000 years, and they still postponed. They still carried someday lists up the mountain. They still needed a teacher to point at dew before they would look at their own mornings. Which means the problem was never the amount of time. Give a sleepwalker a longer hallway and you get a longer sleepwalk. The fantasy that says I would finally live if I had more time stands refuted by an age that had 600 times your allotment and squandered it in exactly your style. Presence is a skill and a choice, available in any quantity of time and guaranteed by none. And that is the real reason the Buddha reached back across the ages for this particular story. And then the Buddha did something extraordinary, something almost no spiritual teacher before or since has had the nerve to do. He counted it out. 100 years, he said, is 300 seasons, 100 winters, 100 summers, 100 rains. 300 seasons is 1,200 months. 1,200 months is 2,400 fortnights. 2,400 fortnights comes to 36,000 days. And a person who eats through all those days, he said, eats something like 72,000 meals. And even that number includes the meals missed, the ones lost to anger, to grief, to sickness, to fasting, right down to the milk at a mother's breast. He reduced an entire human existence to a figure you could write on the back of your hand, and he did it out of compassion, because he knew what the mind does with the word someday, and he knew that no mind can play that game with an actual number. Stay with one strange detail of his accounting, because it holds a teaching most people walk straight past. He counted the meals that never got eaten, the dinners pushed away in anger, the mornings when grief closed the throat, the days of sickness, the fasts, the milk of infancy, all of it folded into the 72,000. Why include them? Because the purse pays out either way. An evening spent inside a resentment is a full evening, deducted at the standard rate. A week lost to a quarrel that neither person can accurately remember starting costs 7 irreplaceable days, billed identically to 7 days of joy. Time does not pause its meter while you suffer, or sulk, or wait by a phone that has decided its own schedule. The Buddha counted the missed meals so his monks would see, with arithmetic clarity, that even the hours you refuse are spent, and a person who truly absorbs that stops donating whole afternoons to arguments that will not exist in a year. Feel the difference in your own chest. Life is short, slides off the mind like water off wax. You have heard it on greeting cards, at funerals, in songs, and it has changed almost nothing about your Tuesday afternoons. 36,000 mornings does something else entirely. A number can be spent, and the mind knows spending intimately. If you are 35, the arithmetic says you have seen close to 13,000 of your mornings already, and the generous remainder, the one that assumes the full 100 years, stands somewhere near 23,000. At 50, the ledger has crossed its midpoint. These are the good numbers. The lucky ones, the ones that assume the road runs its full length, and every person listening knows the road does not sign contracts. Run the count on the things that actually make up a life, and the teaching moves from the mind into the body. If your parents are alive and far away, and you see them twice a year, and the years remaining to them, number 15, then the visits left come to 30. 30 more dinners at that table, 30 more hugs in that doorway. The friend you love and see every couple of months, a few hundred more conversations if you are both fortunate. Summers with a child who still wants your company before the wanting changes. You can count those on your fingers. These numbers feel brutal on first meeting, and then, if you stay with them past the first flinch, something unexpected happens. They stop being a sentence and become a lens. The 30th dinner cannot be taken for granted by anyone who knows it is the 30th. Scarcity, honestly seen, is where preciousness has been hiding all along. Now bring out your own someday list and hold it against the count, the way Araka's students were finally forced to. The book you intend to write, or read. The country you have promised yourself since your 20s. The apology you rehearse in the shower and never deliver. The version of your work that would actually feel like yours, waiting politely behind the version that pays. The conversation with your father that both of you keep almost having. None of these items carries a date, and that has always been the trick of the list, because an undated intention can be carried forever without ever being either done or grieved. The count breaks the trick. Set 30 remaining visits beside the almost conversation and the item suddenly has a deadline. And a deadline, painful as it feels, is the difference between a wish and a plan. Some items, held against the number, will reveal themselves as things you never really wanted and can finally be set down with relief. The rest are asking you one question. If it matters, what is it doing in the someday pile? Notice, too, how differently the world around you answers the shortness of life, because the contrast clarifies what the teaching actually offers. The culture's answer is extension. More years, fought for with serums and supplements and optimized routines, the road lengthened at any cost while the walking itself goes unexamined. A person can add a decade to the far end of a life they were never present for, which is like adding rooms to a house nobody lives in. Araka's answer runs in the other direction entirely. Deep in the mornings you already hold. A single hour, fully entered, outweighs a distracted month, and presence multiplies the value of the count in a way no extension ever can, because it changes the unit itself. The culture is trying to get more life. The teaching is trying to get you into the life you have. Because look again at the dewdrop, the one still hanging in the first light where this section began. What makes it beautiful? A glass bead of the same size, permanent, identical in every optical property, would be a trinket. The dewdrop is jeweled precisely because the light that reveals it is the light that will erase it. Its brevity is doing the shining. Araka's students walked into that field 100 times before he taught them and saw wet grass. They walked out seeing thousands of small perfect endings blazing silver, and the field had changed in no way at all. This is what the teaching offers you, and it costs one honest look. The same morning, the same kitchen, the same faces at the same table, lit from behind by their own impermanence, and suddenly ordinary time is the treasury, and you have been rich without checking the accounts. So let the practice be small and daily, in Araka's own style. Once a day, pick one ordinary thing and see it as the dewdrop. The steam rising off a cup, a song coming through a wall, the specific laugh of a specific person down the hall, a sound that exists nowhere else in the universe and runs on a clock you cannot see. Hold it for 3 breaths with the knowledge that it is passing, and let the passing sharpen it instead of souring it. At 1 meal a day, remember the number 72,000 and taste the food as one of the counted. Nothing about your schedule changes. Everything about the texture changes, and texture, it turns out, was what a lifetime is made of. The Buddha ended the teaching the way a compassionate doctor ends a consultation, with the prescription and the door held open. Whatever a teacher who cares for his students can do for them, he said, I have now done for you. Then he pointed to the quiet places, the roots of the trees, the empty huts, and said the words that have crossed 2,500 years to reach the room you are lying in. Practice now. Do not be negligent. Do not become someone who regrets this later. Notice the furniture of that prescription, tree roots and empty huts, the humblest addresses in the world. He was telling them that the work of waking up requires no temple and no appointment and no improvement in circumstances, only a place to sit and the willingness to stop postponing, and both of those exist wherever you are lying tonight. He had counted the mornings for them so they would never again mistake the road for endless, and the counting was the kindest thing in the whole teaching, because only someone who loves you tells you the real number. And notice what the number does to this exact hour, the one you are resting inside right now. Tonight is one of the counted nights. It was always going to be spent on something, and you are spending it being still, letting an old teaching move through you at its own pace, and by the arithmetic of the pictures that makes this a wealthy hour, fully lived simply because someone was home for it. Nothing more is required of you before sleep. The dew does not strain to shine. Let the day you have just finished join the water quietly, stroke complete, and let the body rest the way the field rests between one morning's dew and the next. 36,000 mornings at the absolute most, and one of them is tomorrow. A question is left standing in the doorway of all this, and it refuses to leave. If the years are that few, how much of one is actually yours to count on? A season, a week, even the rest of tonight. The Buddha once put that exact question to a room of his own monks, and their answers, one after another, were about to teach them how deeply asleep a person can be while doing everything right. The question came in the evening, at a place called the Brick Hall, where the Buddha was staying among his monks. The day's teaching was done, the lamps were being lit, and into the settled quiet he set a question down the way, a chess player sets down a piece that changes the whole board. "Tell me," he said, "mindfulness of death, when it is developed and made strong, bears great fruit. It ripens into freedom itself. Do you practice it?" Picture the room receiving that question. These were men of the road, monks who owned a robe and a bowl and nothing else, gathered at a resting place on the long walking routes of northern India. Among them sat former merchants who had signed away fortunes, former husbands and fathers, a few who had been ascetics of other paths and had starved and scorched themselves for years before finding this teacher. Every man in the hall had already made the largest renunciation his society could imagine, and each had made it for one reason: to stop wasting a human life. If any gathering on earth could claim to take death seriously, it was this one. Which is exactly why the Buddha chose this room for this question, and exactly why what happened next still unsettles everyone who hears it, because the question was about to find every one of them insufficiently awake. Understand what he was asking, because the words can slide past a modern ear. Mindfulness of death means keeping the fact of your own ending close, deliberately, the way a sailor keeps the weather close, letting it inform every reading of the water. He was asking his monks whether they lived with their mortality in view, or whether they had filed it away somewhere comfortable, the way almost every human being files it, in a drawer marked later. It should be said clearly that in this tradition, such remembering was never considered morbid. It was prescribed the way a physician prescribes, as one of the great tonics of the mind, recommended for softening hatred, dissolving vanity, and returning wandering attention to what matters. And the people who practice it have always been recognizably among the most alive in any community. The intuition survives in unexpected places today. Ask the nurses who accompany the dying, and many will tell you their work made them warmer, quicker to forgive, greedier for sunlight and slower to waste an evening, because proximity to endings kept resetting their sense of what a day is worth. The monks in the brick hall were pursuing that same medicine deliberately, at full strength, and the question that opened the evening was their teacher checking the dosage. Around the hall, men who had given up homes and families for the sake of waking up straightened slightly, because each of them believed he had a good answer, and one by one, they gave them. The first monk spoke with quiet confidence. "I practice it like this," he said. "I think, may I live for a day and a night, so that I can attend to the teaching, and much would be accomplished by me." Hear how serious that answer is before the story takes it apart. This was a man who had compressed his ambitions into 24 hours. He made no plans for next season. He assumed no decades. Each morning he greeted the possibility that this day and this night were the last of the series, and he intended to practice accordingly, completely, down to the final lamp. Set his answer beside an ordinary life, beside mortgages structured across 30 years and plans that casually assume a distant retirement, and the man looks like a master of urgency. In any room you have ever sat in, He would be the most death-aware person present by a distance too wide to measure. Hold your own horizons up beside that monk's single day, just to establish the scale of what follows. An ordinary adult life runs on assumed decades. The loan on the house presumes 30 years of your breathing, signed for without a tremor. The pension contributions presume you at 67, silver-haired and finally free, a character in a story nobody has confirmed. Friendships are maintained on the assumption of endless future dinners, which is why this year's dinner keeps being reschedulable. Even the small talk presumes, "See you next week. We should catch up sometime. Next summer for sure." 1,000 tiny promissory notes drawn against an account no one has ever been allowed to check. Nothing about this makes anyone foolish. Planning is how humans build, and the teaching has no quarrel with calendars. The trouble arrives silently, when the plans stop being tools and become a belief, when the mind starts experiencing the imagined decades as possessed rather than hoped for, and on that quiet confusion, whole lives float out to sea. The Buddha said nothing. He let the answer stand in the lamplight, and his silence invited the next. A second monk spoke. "I think, may I live just for a day, to attend to the teaching, and much would be accomplished." The night had been trimmed away. One rotation of light, dawn to dark, held as the entire possible remainder of a life. A third monk went further and cut the day in half. A fourth abandoned the day altogether and reached for a humbler clock. "May I live for the time it takes to eat a single alms-round meal," he said. "One bowl of food received and eaten in awareness, and much would be accomplished." Feel the floor of the countdown dropping. These men were bidding downward, each answer shrinking the assumed remainder of a life. A day and a night, a day, half a day, a meal, and somewhere in the hall, the monks who had answered first were beginning to hear their own urgency, sounding strangely leisurely. Be careful, though, with the picture of a competition, because that would miss the heart of the room. No monk was trying to win. Each was reporting, honestly, the actual span he had trained his mind to hold, and each report was the fruit of real years of practice. What the sequence reveals is something more moving than rivalry. It reveals how many layers of postponement exist inside a human mind, and how sincere a person can be at every single layer. The monk of one day had genuinely dismantled the monk of 30 years inside himself. The monk of one meal had genuinely dismantled the monk of one day. Each had burned away the coarser sleep and settled, in complete good faith, onto a finer one, the way a person wakes from a dream into another dream and calls it morning. A fifth monk halved the meal. A sixth reduced it to almost nothing at all. "May I live for the time it takes to chew and swallow 4 or 5 mouthfuls of food," he said. Sit inside that answer for a breath. 4 or 5 mouthfuls. A minute of ordinary eating, maybe 2. This monk woke each morning without assuming he would finish breakfast. Halfway through any bowl of rice, his working assumption located the end of his life closer than the bottom of the bowl. By every standard the world uses, by every standard you and I use on our most mortality-honest days, this man had reached the summit of the practice. There was visibly nowhere further to climb. Then a seventh monk cut it to a single mouthful. One act of chewing and swallowing held as a whole potential lifespan, and the hall must have felt the game reaching its limit. And then the last monk spoke. His answer has crossed 25 centuries without losing a degree of its temperature. I practice like this, he said. I think, may I live for the time it takes to breathe in and breathe out, so that I can attend to the teaching. Much would be accomplished by me. One breath. In and out. The span you have used up several times since this sentence began. That monk held his entire assumed future inside a single cycle of air, and inside that span, he intended to be fully awake, fully attending, fully alive to the teaching, and he called that much accomplished, and he meant it. He was standing at the true floor of the countdown, the place where the arithmetic of a life stops shrinking, because beneath one breath there is nothing left to divide. A being either has the current breath or the story is over. Everything past the exhale, the next inhale included, has always been a rumor. Imagine the hall in the seconds after he finished speaking. The lamps ticking softly. 7 monks sitting with their own answers suddenly audible to themselves in a new key, each man privately rerunning the arithmetic of his practice and finding rooms in it he had never searched. The monk of the day and night, a serious man, feeling the strange vertigo of discovering that his summit was somebody's foothill. And through the whole room, beneath any embarrassment, something better spreading, the specific excitement that fills sincere people when a ceiling they did not know about is suddenly shown to them, with the ladder still reachable. Every eye turned to the teacher, because only he could say which of the 8 answers was the true measure. Then the Buddha gave his verdict, and the verdict is the earthquake of this story. The monks who held a day and a night in mind, he said, and the monks who held a day, a half day, a meal, a half meal, even 4 or 5 mouthfuls. All of these are called monks who live negligently. Their mindfulness of death, he said, is sluggish. Sluggish. The man who did not expect to survive his own breakfast was, by this measure, still moving slowly, still coasting on assumed time. Only the last 2, the monk of the single mouthful and the monk of the single breath, were named as ones who live diligently, whose awareness of death is keen, sharpened all the way down to the edge that actually cuts. And he told the assembly to train themselves as those 2 trained keenly at the resolution of the breath for the sake of the deepest freedom a mind can reach. Stay with the shock of that grading, because it refuses every comfortable landing the mind reaches for. The verdict says that a person can compress their whole horizon to a single day and still be asleep. Why? Because a day is still a possession. The monk of the day and night still held a small estate of hours, and an estate, however small, can be managed, budgeted, divided into a now and a later. Within his single day there was still room to say, "This morning I will settle my mind, and this afternoon I will really practice." And there, in that innocent little scheduling, the ancient sleep resumes, because later has been reborn inside the day like a weed regrowing from a fragment of root. The deferral does not care how small its territory becomes. Give it one day and it will build a calendar. Give it one meal and it will save the real attention for the last mouthfuls. Only at the resolution of one breath does the weed finally die, because a single breath has no interior in which anything can be postponed. There is no later inside an exhale. You keep such estates yourself, and the verdict at the brick hall names them with uncomfortable precision. The weekend is an estate, the little kingdom where real living has been scheduled while the week is endured. The vacation is a larger one, 11 months of postponed presents redeemed in a rush of 14 days that somehow evaporate under their own pressure. Retirement is the great estate, the imagined country where the deferred marriage will finally be attended to, the deferred health, the deferred wonder, all of it waiting in a decade that arrives, when it arrives at all, with different knees and different energies, and sometimes an empty chair where the co-dreamer was supposed to sit. And threaded through every week of every year runs the smallest estate of all, the phrase "when things calm down," a season that has been coming since your 20s the way the horizon has been coming, at a fixed distance, at every speed. You could ask anyone over 70 whether things ever calm down, and watch them smile before they answer, because the season of calm was a story the busy years told themselves, and the busy years believed it to the end. The teaching is standing in the doorway of all these kingdoms saying one thing: the living cannot be stored. It happens at the resolution of the breath, or it does not happen. Now look at what the one-breath monk actually held, because the first impression, a man braced grimly against constant death, misses him completely. Consider the accounting of a person who genuinely does not assume the next inhale. Nothing in his life can remain pending. He cannot be halfway through an apology he means to finish someday, because someday requires breaths he has stopped claiming. He cannot hold a grudge in storage, waiting for the right moment to set it down, because storage is a bet on time and he has quit gambling. Whatever love he has to spend now. Whatever truth he owes falls due now. Whatever taste of the teaching is available, this breath is where it will be tasted or missed. His books balance at the close of every exhale, and a being whose books always balance walks through the world with a lightness that people mistake for luck. Walk beside him through a single morning and watch the standard operate. He wakes, and the first breath of the day is received as a gift with no invoice attached, because by his own accounting he had no claim on it. He washes, and the cold water is fully felt, since a man may as well feel the last water completely. On the arms round, he meets the eyes of the woman who puts rice in his bowl, actually meets them, and she carries that half second of total reception with her for the rest of her day without knowing why the morning improved. When a younger monk asks him a question, he answers with everything he has, holding nothing in reserve for a fuller explanation some other time, because his arithmetic contains no other time. When he sits to practice, he sits without the faint background haze of somewhere else to be, and the practice, undiluted, goes deep the way anything undiluted goes deep. Nothing about his outer schedule differs from his brother's by a single item. The difference lives entirely in the density of the hours, and density, as the third story of this journey showed from another angle, is the true unit in which a lifespan should have been measured all along. And feel the strange peace at the bottom of that. The peace this entire video has been circling from 4 directions. You might expect a man who dies at every exhale to live in terror. The opposite happens, and by now you can see the mechanics of why. Anxiety about death is made entirely of future, of imagined hospital rooms and unfinished decades, and the one-breath monk has withdrawn his residence from the future altogether. There is nothing left in that territory for anxiety to feed on. What remains is this breath, which is here, which is enough, which is in fact the only place aliveness has ever physically occurred. He surrendered the rumor of tomorrow and received the certainty of now, and of the two, now turns out to be the only one that was ever real currency. Bring this into the rooms of your own life and start with the ledger of pending things, because every listener carries one. Somewhere in your accounts there is a message you have composed 12 times and never sent. A forgiveness you have decided on in principle, pending a ceremony that keeps not arriving. A thank you that a certain person has earned across years and never once heard said plainly. Words for your children or your parents that you are saving, as if words were wine that improves in the cellar. The one breath standard walks through that ledger like an auditor with the lights on. Every pending item is a bet placed on breaths that belong to no one, and the people you are betting with are the people you love most. Some debts truly need their moment, and wisdom knows the difference. Most are simply waiting on courage, and the teaching offers the courage a deadline, the honest one, the only one there has ever been. Speak while the breath that can carry the words is still yours. Anyone who has stood at 2 different funerals knows both outcomes of this ledger, and the difference between them is one of the sharpest teachings life ever administers. At the first kind, the grief has a jagged edge. The mourners carry sentences that will now never be delivered, and you can see the weight of the undelivered in their faces, the apology that waited 1 season too long, the pride in a son that was felt for 40 years and spoken never, the visit postponed into impossibility. Their pain has 2 layers, the loss itself, and beneath it the quiet, corrosive knowledge of the unsent. At the second kind of funeral, the sorrow is somehow clean. Everyone in the room had heard it all. She told us constantly, they say, laughing through it. He knew exactly what he meant to me. We talked about everything. There was nothing left unsaid. The loss is just as total. The love was simply paid in full while the account was open, and grief without arrears, it turns out, is a different substance entirely. The one breath standard is how a person ends up at the second funeral, on either side of the casket. There is a quieter version of the same ledger that runs through every family, and it belongs in this story because it explains what the monk's standard protects. The big losses announce themselves, and the small ones never do. Somewhere in the past of every parent there was a final time a child asked to be carried, and it passed unmarked. An ordinary Tuesday, arms full of groceries. In a minute, sweetheart, and the asking simply never came again. There was a last time your own mother read to you, a last game in the street with the childhood friends, played by children who fully expected to play tomorrow. Life is quietly full of these unmarked endings, hundreds of them already behind you, an unknown number ahead, and none of them will introduce themselves on arrival. The person who lives at the resolution of the breath holds no advantage in knowing which time is the last. Their advantage is stranger and better. They were fully there for every time, and so whenever the last one turns out to have been, it was met, tasted, and honored, and nothing that mattered was sleepwalked past. Then let the teaching become physical, because the Buddha anchored it in the body on purpose, and the practice is already installed in you. Sometime tonight, or now, follow one breath the whole way through as if it were, itself, a complete life. It begins from nothing, the way you did. It rises, fills, reaches a quiet summit where for an instant nothing moves, and then it lets go, falling away easily, emptying to a stillness at the bottom, and out of that stillness, unearned and ungrasped, the next one arrives on its own. A whole existence in miniature, birth and fullness and release, handed to you roughly 20,000 times a day for your entire life, and almost never watched even once. The monk of the one breath was simply a man who had learned to watch, and to find each small lifetime sufficient, and in that sufficiency the endless hunger for more time quietly starved. For the days ahead, let the practice ride on the hinges of your routine, the small doorways you already pass through. One conscious breath in the car before you walk into the house, so that the person who enters is actually the one who arrives, and the residue of the workday stays in the driveway where it belongs. One breath before answering the phone call you have been dreading, and the call goes differently because a settled voice settles the voice it meets. One breath at the kettle, at the red light, in the elevator, those dead zones the mind usually fills with rehearsal and replay, converted one at a time into the most alive seconds of the hour. The monk needed no special posture, and neither do you. The whole apparatus travels inside your ribs, free, silent, and already running. And here, one last time, the strangest phrase in the monk's answer, because it quietly redefines a word your whole culture is organized around. Much would be accomplished by me, he said, of a span too short to send a message or earn a coin. What can possibly be accomplished in one breath? Everything, by the teaching's accounting, because accomplishment here means complete presence in a complete moment, and one moment fully attended is a finished work in a way that a distracted decade never becomes. The world measures accomplishment in volume, in output stacked against the years, and by that measure a deathbed can look at a mountain of achievements and still whisper, I was never really there for any of it. The monk's measure runs on depth, and by his measure, a single breath, fully inhabited, already justifies the morning. You could stop striving to build a life worth remembering and begin, breath by breath, to build one worth inhabiting, and discover at the end that they were the same project done in the only workable order. There is a further doorway here, and it can be pointed at plainly, even though words go quiet near it. The Buddha said this practice plunges into the deathless. Notice the strangeness of the promise, that the closest possible intimacy with dying opens onto something dying cannot reach. A person who fully releases each breath, each moment, each version of themselves as it passes, begins to notice the awareness inside which all of that arising and passing takes place, the still water under the strokes of the stick. Every ending you have ever survived was witnessed by it. The teaching goes no further in words, and neither will this video, except to say that the monks who heard the verdict at the brick hall understood freedom to be waiting in exactly that direction, one honest breath at a time. One practical consequence deserves saying aloud, because it addresses the fear that brought many listeners to this video in the first place. A person who has practiced this way arrives at their actual dying as something other than a stranger to it. They have rehearsed release 20,000 times a day for years. Every exhale was a small letting go completed. Every fallen asleep night a surrender survived. And when the great version of the familiar motion finally approaches, it approaches as the master class of a subject they have long studied, rather than an ambush in a foreign language. The tradition is full of accounts of practitioners meeting their last hours with a composure that astonished the people around them, and the composure was never a performance. It was fluency. They had simply done the dying in installments, breath by breath across the decades, until the final installment was just the next one. So let tonight be simple. The day you have just lived is finishing, and you can finish it completely the way the one-breath monk finished everything. Let the conversations of today be over. Let the mistakes of today be today's, fully, with nothing carried forward on the books. Each exhale as you settle towards sleep can set down one more piece of the day, until what remains is only a resting body and the small tide moving through it, arriving and releasing, arriving and releasing, each cycle complete in itself, asking nothing of tomorrow. This is the wealth the monk was pointing at. You are breathing it right now. And if sleep comes while you are watching one of these small tides, let it come, because falling asleep inside a fully received breath is a beautiful way to end one of the counted days. The teaching will still be here in the morning, riding the first inhale you did nothing to earn, ready to begin again from nothing, exactly the way you will. The men in that lamplit hall had one advantage that must be named, and naming it opens the final story of this journey. Their enormous sincerity was pointed in a true direction, at a practice that actually leads where it promises to lead. Sincerity alone has never been enough, because devotion follows its road wherever the road goes, and some roads, walked with perfect discipline for a lifetime, arrive nowhere at all. The Buddha met such a man once, one of the most disciplined human beings ever to approach him, and what that man had done with decades of flawless effort left even the Buddha reluctant to answer him. He crossed the ground on his hands and knees. A grown man, naked, weathered by years of open sky, moving on all fours through the dust toward the place where the Buddha sat, and when he arrived, he did what he always did on arriving anywhere. He curled himself down at the edge of the gathering, the way a dog curls at the edge of a camp, and looked up with a dog's patient attention, waiting to be acknowledged. Nobody laughed. That is the first thing to understand about this story, and the strangest. Nobody in that gathering laughed, because in the India of that age, this man was a figure of religious seriousness, and many of the people watching him believed they were looking at one of the bravest practitioners in the region. The gathering itself was the kind that collected wherever the Buddha stayed, and its mixture explains the held breath in the air that day. Householders sat beside wandering seekers. Monks of the community sat near curious Brahmins who had come to test the famous teacher and stayed longer than they planned. Every spiritual current of a restless age washed through such assemblies, and everyone present knew the reputation of the two figures now approaching, the dogman and the oxman, extremists of a severity that most of the audience privately doubted they could survive for a single week. Questions between famous practitioners and famous teachers were public events in that world, remembered and repeated down the roads for months. Whatever was about to be asked and answered would travel, and perhaps some instinct of exactly that made the whole clearing lean in as the crawling man settled himself in the dust. His name was Seniya, and he had taken up what was called the dog duty, a discipline as literal as its name. He lived as a dog in every particular he could manage. He ate only food thrown on the ground, lowering his face to take it directly with his mouth, hands kept out of it, because dogs have no hands. He slept outside, curled on bare earth in every season, through the cold months and the rains. He went naked, walked on all fours, refused every comfort that belonged to the human station he was trying to shed. And he had done this for years. Feel the weight of that duration before anything else in the story moves. Through fevers and festivals, through the stares of children and the long indifference of hot afternoons, through every single morning when a warm human life stood one decision away, this man got back down on his hands and knees. Whatever else can be said of Seniya, and the story will say hard things, no one has ever been entitled to call him lazy. His discipline would have broken almost anyone listening to this, and it never once broke him. Picture a single night of it, to feel what years of it meant. A cold season night in the open, the ground pulling warmth out of a bare body hour after hour, the curled position held because the discipline required it, sleep arriving in shallow, shivering installments. Somewhere before dawn, a village fire glows across the fields, and around it there are blankets, and cooked food served in bowls, and the entire abandoned world of human comfort sits one short walk away. And when the light comes, the man does what he has done every single dawn for years. He recommits. He puts his palms back into the cold dust and begins another day of the vow, and whatever else this story will conclude about where his road led, that daily act of recommitment deserves to be witnessed with respect, because it is the identical act that every genuine practitioner performs, and he performed it with a purity most genuine practitioners never reach. Beside him that day walked a companion in extremity, a man named Punna, who had taken up the ox duty. Punna wore horns fastened to his head and a tail fastened behind, and he lived on grass, grazing bent over in the fields with the cattle, lowing, moving as they moved. The two of them had likely known each other the way specialists know each other, rivals and brothers at once, the region's two great imitators, each committed to his animal with a thoroughness that made ordinary austerities look like hobbies. Now, before the modern mind files these two men away as madmen, their logic deserves a fair hearing, because it was a real logic, and versions of it are still running the lives of people you know. The spiritual marketplace of their era taught, in many of its schools, that suffering was currency. The body was the obstacle, comfort was the enemy, and whoever endured the most extreme self-denial was burning away impurity and purchasing a glorious rebirth, paying for heaven in the only coin the heavens were thought to accept. By that accounting, Senia was a wealthy man. Every meal taken from the dirt was a deposit. Every freezing night was interest accruing. He had structured his entire existence as one long payment toward a future among the gods, and he had made the payments with a consistency that shames most people's efforts at anything. And ask, while the picture is still forming, how a man ends up on such a road in the first place, because no one invents the dog duty alone in a field. It was received. Somewhere at the beginning stood a teacher who taught it with authority, and behind that teacher a lineage of others, and around the whole structure an atmosphere of ancientness that made questioning feel like vandalism. A young seeker, burning with the real hunger for liberation that burns in every era, meets a tradition that says, here is the price of heaven, and the fiercest thing he can think to do with his sincerity is pay it harder than anyone. Notice that at no point in that sequence does the question, where does this actually lead, get a natural opening. The hunger is real, the authority is confident, the effort is all-consuming, and the road simply arrives underfoot, pre-approved, the way most of the roads in most lives arrive, inherited whole from voices that sounded certain at a moment when certainty was needed. The villages he moved through read him exactly this way. They bowed to him. They spoke of his hardness with awe. Mothers pointed him out to children as a man of terrifying holiness, and the bowing and the awe had sealed the practice shut, because a discipline that earns reverence stops getting questioned, first by the world, then by the one performing it. Until the day the two of them came to the Buddha, and Punna asked the question that neither of them had ever asked out loud. Punna gestured toward his friend, curled in the dust in his years of discipline, and said, "This Senia practices the dog duty, hard to do, long undertaken. He takes his food only from the ground, He has perfected it. Tell us, where does it lead? What becomes of him? And the Buddha, who answered questions from kings and killers, who was famous across the region for refusing no sincere inquiry, looked at the man curled on the ground and said, "Enough, Punna, let it be. Do not ask me that. Stop here, because that refusal is one of the tenderest moments in all the old accounts." He could see the answer, and he could see the man, and he could see what the answer would do to the man, and he chose silence. Punna asked a second time. Again, the Buddha turned the question away. Enough, let it be. And in the space of those refusals, you can feel the scale of what was coming, the way you feel a doctor's news before it is spoken, in the extra moment the doctor takes at the door. Compassion sometimes withholds, and it withheld twice. Then Punna asked the third time, and by the custom of that world, a third sincere asking must be answered, and the Buddha answered. Something about those two refusals deserves carrying with you beyond this story. The Buddha lived surrounded by practices he could see through, whole landscapes of misdirected effort in every district he walked, and the accounts show him doing almost no unsolicited demolition. He waited to be asked, and even asked, he waited to be asked insistently, because a truth delivered before a person is ready to hold it tends to wound without freeing. The third asking mattered. By the third asking, something in Punna and something in the curled figure listening beside him had consented to hear the real answer, and consent is the ground truth of all deep teaching. The moments that change a life cannot be forced on a life. They can only be scheduled by the readiness of the one asking, which is worth remembering the next time you are tempted to hand someone a truth they have asked for 0 times. "Well then," he said, "since I cannot persuade you to let it be, I will tell you. A person who develops the dog duty fully and without interruption, who perfects the habit of a dog, the mind of a dog, the behavior of a dog, goes, when the body breaks up, to companionship with dogs. He is reborn among them. The practice does exactly what practice always does. It delivers the practitioner to what was practiced. A mind rehearsed for years into the shape of a dog arrives, with terrible precision, at the destination it rehearsed. Stay with that mechanism a moment, because it operates in you today with the same precision, whichever way rebirth is held. A being becomes what it repeats. Every rehearsed pattern, run daily for years, carves its channel deeper until the water of the mind flows there by default. A person who practices irritation at every red light for a decade has built a master of irritation, and no diploma is issued, and the mastery is real. A person who rehearses self-contempt every time a mirror appears has trained toward a destination, as surely as Senia trained toward his, and arrives a little more completely each year. The teaching cuts both ways with equal force. Rehearse patience in the small collisions of a household, and patience becomes the resting shape of you. Rehearse gratitude at the day's edges, honesty in the small transactions, presence in one breath at a time, and those become the channels the water finds on its own. Nobody escapes the mechanism. There is only the question the two ascetics never asked, hanging over every repeated thing in a life. What am I becoming by practicing what I practice? And there is worse, the Buddha said, and he said it because the whole truth was now owed. If such a practitioner holds the view that this conduct is carrying him to heaven, that the dirt and the cold are purchasing a place among the gods, then that belief itself is a wrong view, a deep misreading of how reality works, and a wrong view held to the end opens onto destinations darker still. So the perfected practice leads to the kennel, he said, and the failed practice, propped up by the false belief, leads lower. Heaven was never on this road at all. And Senya wept. The account gives him to us without any softening, a naked man in the dust, crying, and then it gives him one sentence, and the sentence is the reason his story has survived. I am not weeping for what the Blessed One has said about me, he managed. I am weeping because this dog duty of mine has been long practiced, and practiced in vain. Read that again slowly, because most people, handed a verdict like that, produce anger or argument or a swift retreat into the crowd of everyone who had always bowed to them. Senya produced grief, and grief of the most precise kind. He did not grieve the insult, because he understood there had been none. He grieved the years. The fevers endured for nothing. The 10,000 meals taken from the dirt, each one a deposit into an account that had never existed. The winters survived on bare ground while warm rooms stood a field away, the decade of human touch foregone, the whole vast expenditure of a rare human birth, audited in an instant and found to have purchased nothing. In a single afternoon, the entire ledger of his adult life was revealed as a long transfer into the void, and he had the courage to see it whole and let it break his heart. And that courage, the story is about to show, was the first genuinely liberating act of his life. Measure how rare that response is, because the common alternative has a name, and it quietly runs a great deal of the world. When years of investment are threatened by new truth, the ordinary human move is to protect the investment by rejecting the truth. The mind whispers that too much has been paid in to stop now, that admitting the waste would make the waste real, and so the person doubles the effort instead, eats from the ground with fresh ferocity, defends the practice more loudly precisely because the doubt has been heard and must be drowned. Careers that died years ago are worked harder for exactly this reason. Marriages are performed rather than repaired. Beliefs are gripped whitest at the moment they crack. And 10 wasted years are converted into 20 because the first 10 refused to be grieved. Senya, the extremist, the man of the dirt and the cold, turned out to be free of the one attachment that traps the reasonable. He let the sunk years be sunk. He paid the grief in full, on the spot, and walked out of the account forever, and everything the rest of his story achieves flows from that single solvency. Then, in one of those mirrored moments, the old account's love, Senya wiped his face and ask the same question about his friend. And Punna the oxman, horns and tail and years of grazing, received the same mechanics. Perfected ox conduct delivers its practitioner to the company of oxen. The belief that it buys heaven is the same wrong view with the same darker flaw beneath it. And Punna wept the same tears for the same wasted years, two of the most disciplined men of their generation, crying together in front of the teacher who had tried, twice, to spare them the arithmetic. Sit now with what this story establishes, because it dismantles one of the most durable confusions in all of human effort. Sincerity is real, and effort is real, and neither one is a compass. Devotion supplies the engine of a life. It has never once supplied the steering. A person can pour flawless discipline down a road for decades, and the road does what roads do. It goes where it goes, indifferent to the magnificence of the walking. Senia's tragedy was never weakness. Weak men quit the dog duty in a week. His tragedy was strength poured into an unexamined direction, and that specific combination, enormous effort riding on an unasked question, may waste more human years than laziness ever has. What the Buddha gave the two weeping men next was the steering, and it remains one of the clearest teachings he ever delivered. There are 4 kinds of action, he told them. There is dark action that ripens into dark results, conduct that harms, driven by cruelty or greed or delusion, returning to its maker as suffering. There is bright action that ripens bright, conduct grown from kindness, from honesty, from a mind that intends well, returning as well-being. There is the mixed weave of both, which is most human lives. And there is a 4th kind, the action of letting the whole machinery go, the path that leads beyond the making of results altogether into the freedom this entire teaching serves. Hear what is missing from all 4 categories. Posture is missing. Diet is missing. Costume, hardship, spectacle, reputation, all missing. The sorting principle from top to bottom is the quality of the intention in the mind that acts. What you water in the heart is what grows in the life. A man could sleep in the dirt for 50 years, and if the mind inside the austerity was rehearsing doghood, doghood is the harvest. A woman could live an outwardly unremarkable life of school runs and grocery lists, and if the mind inside it practices patience and honesty and care, she is the one on the bright road, whatever the spiritual athletes of her era think of her. Imagine receiving that teaching as the 2 weeping men received it, with the dirt of the old road still on their hands. All those years, heaven had been treated as a distant purchase, priced in suffering, payable only through extremity. And here was the actual map, saying that the bright road began one honest intention away, in the very next act, available to a householder with a full pantry as easily as to an ascetic in the frost. The door they had been trying to batter down with their bodies for decades had been standing unlocked the entire time, around the corner, marked with the least dramatic word in the language: kindness. There is a particular ache in learning that the answer was gentler than the search, and both men felt it that afternoon. And anyone who has finally put down a punishing path they mistook for the price of worthiness has felt it too. This is the line the story draws between ritual and understanding, and the line runs straight through the present day. A practice works through what it cultivates in the mind, and through nothing else. The same bow, the same fast, the same hour of sitting can be transformation or empty choreography, depending entirely on what the mind is doing inside the form. Senya had copied the outside of a life meticulously and left the inside untouched, and the teaching he received holds with the same force for every era's ways of copying the outside of a life. Because your world is dense with dog duties, and they are wearing better costumes than Senya's. Consider the 4 in the morning routine copied from a billionaire's memoir, performed with monastic rigor by someone who has never asked whether their own body, their own work, their own life bears any resemblance to the billionaire's. The cold plunges, the fasting windows, the optimization stacks, adopted whole from the feed of some glowing stranger, practiced with a discipline Senya would recognize on sight, pointed at a destination nobody has verified. Consider the career ladder climbed rung by rung for 20 years because it was the ladder everyone respected, its summit never once inspected for whether anything worth having is up there. The hustle performed as devotion, the busyness worn as horns and tail. Even meditation itself, and this must be said in a video like this one, can become a dog duty, an app streak defended for 400 days by a mind that spends the 10 minutes rehearsing its grievances with perfect posture. The form is flawless. The question, where does this lead, has never been asked out loud, and the reverence of everyone watching keeps sealing it shut, exactly as the bowing villages sealed Senya's. And beneath the visible routines run the older inheritances, the dog duties that were draped over you before you could evaluate anything at all. Every family hands down its vows. In one house, the vow says love is proved by worry, and so the grown children of that house practice anxiety over each other as devotion, generation after generation, nobody asking where it leads. In another, the vow says rest must be earned and never quite is, and its heirs work through every illness and holiday, performing exhaustion as virtue for parents long dead. There are households where conflict is handled by decades of silence, others where affection must arrive disguised as criticism to be admissible, and the members practice these forms with Senya's own fidelity, because the forms arrived wearing the authority of everyone they loved first. These are the hardest practices to see, precisely because they feel less like habits than like the shape of reality itself. They were your first weather, and they answer to the same question as every other practice, asked gently, where does this lead, and did anyone ever actually check? Be clear, though, about what the question is for, because there is a cheap counterfeit of it in wide circulation. The question comes from love of the life being spent, and that separates it completely from the reflex of sneering at all ritual, which costs nothing and builds nothing. Plenty of forms in a human life hold their answer beautifully. The candle lit at the same hour, the walk taken daily to the same bend in the river, the words said over food, the sitting practice done each morning with the mind actually present inside it. These pass the question the moment it is asked, and asking makes them glow, because a ritual that knows its own purpose is among the strongest structures a life can be built from. The examined practice deepens. Only the unexamined one should fear the question, which is exactly how you can tell them apart from the inside. So borrow Punna's question and aim it at one practice of your own. Choose the routine you defend most automatically, the one that would sting a little to examine, which is generally how you find it. And ask, plainly, where does this lead? If a clear answer comes back, an honest line from this habit to a life you actually want, then the practice is sound, and the asking has only made it stronger. If what comes back is a silence, or a recited answer in someone else's voice, or the strange defensive flair that guards every unexamined thing, then you have found dirt you have been eating from for years, and the finding is a mercy, whatever it feels like in the first hour. You may even find grief, Senia's grief, for time that cannot be refunded. Let it come if it comes. In this story, tears were the hinge on which an entire existence turned, because only the man who truly feels the wasted years stops adding to them. And now watch what Senia did with the worst afternoon of his life, because this is why his story closes this journey. He did not crawl back to the villages that revered him, though the door stood open and the bowing would have resumed by evening. He stood up, a man on 2 feet, and asked to be taught. He asked to join the community and practice the path that actually led somewhere. And here the account records a detail so characteristic it almost hurts. The Buddha told him that those coming from other disciplines ordinarily waited out a probation of 4 months to show the sincerity of the turn. 4 months to a man who had just learned he had wasted a decade or more. And Senia answered, "If it is 4 months, I will wait 4 months, and if it must be 4 years, then let it be 4 years." There it was, unbroken, the same magnificent engine that had carried him through all the freezing nights, the endurance, the totality, the refusal to do anything by halves. Nothing about his capacity for devotion had been the problem. The road had been the problem, and now the engine sat on a true road for the first time in its existence. And consider what those months of waiting actually asked of him, because they were, in a quiet way, the first test of the new direction. The old road had rewarded spectacle. Extremity got noticed, hardness got revered, and a man could measure his progress by the awe on the faces around him. The probation offered nothing to watch. Just ordinary months among the community, learning to sit like a man, to eat from a bowl with human hands, to be nobody special in a crowd of practitioners, the region's most famous extremist rendered completely unremarkable. For some seekers, that anonymity would have stung worse than the frost ever did, because more austerities than anyone admits are performed partly for the audience. Senia took the anonymity the way he had taken the winters. Whatever had driven him all those years, the deepest part of it turned out to be genuine hunger for the goal, and a genuine hunger does not care whether the eating is watched. He was accepted, and he trained, and the account closes his story with the highest sentence it ever bestows on anyone. Dwelling alone, withdrawn, diligent, ardent, the man who had eaten from the ground realized here and now, for himself, the very goal of the holy life, and became one of the fully liberated. Complete awakening. The man on all fours in the dust at the beginning of this section walked all the way to the end of the path, further than kings, further than the scholars who had never wasted a year in their lives, and the distance was covered by the same legs and the same relentless heart, re-aimed. Spare a moment for Punna as well, because his quieter ending carries its own permission. The oxman heard the same verdict and shed the same tears, and his turn took a different shape. He took refuge in the teaching as a lay follower, a man returning to ordinary clothes and ordinary work, carrying the 4 kinds of action home to a regular life among fields and family. The tradition honors both endings without ranking the men against each other. One re-aimed his devotion into total practice, and one re-aimed it into an honest household, and both walked off the false road on the same afternoon, which was the only part that was ever mandatory. The teaching has never demanded that everyone becomes senior. It asks the direction question, and it fully accepts every honest answer, in robes or in work clothes, in a monastery or a kitchen. Take the full arc of him into your chest, because it is aimed at the person listening who fears their own years are too lost to recover. Senya is the tradition's standing answer to the question, is it too late for me? The verdict on his practice was total, and the verdict on him was never written, because beings are not their mistaken roads. Every quality he had built in the wrong direction, the endurance, the consistency, the capacity for wholehearted commitment, transferred whole to the true direction on the day he turned, and what had been the machinery of his waste became the machinery of his freedom. Your years are the same. Whatever they built, even wrongly, they built strength, and strength travels. The discipline learned in a job that meant nothing, the loyalty learned in a love that failed, the endurance learned in years you regret, all of it stands ready to serve the first true road you give it. Nothing sincerely lived is ever entirely wasted, once the direction is finally honest. And with his turning, the last piece of this evening's long teaching slides into place, because the 5 travelers you have walked with were always describing one journey. A man in a crowd learned where a life is actually held, in the attention carried level through the noise. A creature in a borrowed skin showed what that attention must be honest about, the plane being underneath everything worn over it. An old teacher counted out how briefly the being gets to walk, and a monk in a lamplit hall found the true resolution of the walking, one breath, completely inhabited. Senya arrived last to add the piece without which the others can still be squandered. Direction, presence, honesty, urgency, immediacy, all of it finally pointed somewhere true, and pointed by the simple, renewable courage of asking where a road leads before spending another year walking it. Tonight, the honest direction asks nothing dramatic of you. It asks one question of one habit, some morning soon. It asks the pending words to be spoken while breath remains to carry them. It asks you to taste tomorrow's meals as counted, to carry your attention like a full bowl through one stretch of your day, and to let the plain grey creature you actually are walk unhidden for a few steps and feel the air on its own skin. Small turns, a few degrees of steering. Senia turned further in one afternoon, and the road he stepped onto is the road that has been unrolling beneath you for the last few hours, and it is still under your feet as this evening settles around you now. Somewhere in the first minutes of this video, a monk in a lamplit hall was asked how long a person should expect to live, and he answered with the breath you were taking as you heard him. You have taken many thousands since. Each one arrived on its own, was received or missed, and returned to the air. And the ones that were received are the reason these hours have felt different from ordinary hours. Nothing needs to be remembered from tonight. Teachings like these work the way rain works, soaking in past the part of you that memorizes, down to the part that simply grows. They will surface on their own in the coming days, at a red light, in a doorway. Halfway through a meal, you suddenly begin to taste. A man carries a full bowl through a crowd somewhere in you now. A grey creature stands unhidden in a moonlit field. Dew is shining on the grass, and a road is being walked one honest step at a time, and a question rests gently against every habit you own. Let them live where they landed. Life is shorter than you think, and tonight that truth can finally set its weight down, because you have spent an evening looking at it directly, and it has become what it always wanted to be for you. A reason. Sleep now, easily, and let tomorrow arrive the way the next breath arrives, unearned and completely yours.